Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Wine, Women, and Words. And joining us tonight, as always, is Michelle.
Hello.
And our special guest tonight is Greer Mcallister, the author of our book of the month, Woman 99. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you for the invitation. Always appreciated.
Yes, we love having you on and talking about the books. And by the way, guys, before we get into it, it's going to be filled with spoilers. There's just a ton of spoilers that we need to unpack. So if you are really sensitive about it, and if you haven't finished the book yet, I recommend stopping now, finish the book, and then come back. That's my advice.
I feel like this weekend is like one giant anti-spoiler movement for everything that's happening this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's like, don't spoil anything between
like Avengers, Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm not emotionally prepared for tonight. not even a little bit, because I know someone's gonna die and I'm not ready.
Well, I mean, it is Game of Thrones. Somebody always dies on that, so I don't understand why it's so surprising.
I have one character that I have loved from day one, and he has made it this far. And last week, there was a scene that was basically like, he's gonna die, isn't he? So
I'm not a Game of Thrones fan, so I'm like, meh.
I'm guessing I might know who you're talking about. Do you want me to guess, or are we keeping Game of Thrones spoilers out of this podcast
well,
also?
It's not really a spoiler if it's my guess that he's gonna die. It's Jorah. Jorah has been my favorite.
Jorah, I love Jorah too. I thought you might be talking about Grey Worm. Like, everybody had this moment where you're like, okay, that could be the end of their arc. Like, that might be the end of Brienne. That might be the end of whoever. They're like, no.
Jorah is like, oh, I know. There are characters that I feel like, okay, you have served your purpose. Like the Hound, he has served his purpose, I feel like. But Jorah has not served his purpose. He will never serve his purpose completely, and therefore he cannot die. It's my thought.
This is
but
solid.
Anyway, we're here to talk about Game of Thrones, even though I probably could for a whole hour.
Well, we need to do a round robin of what everybody's drinking. So guess first, Greer, what are you drinking?
Oh, yes. Well, I got especially thematically resonant wine. I was so excited when I saw it at my local Trader Joe's. It has a picture of Nellie Bly on the cover, or on the label. So it's in Brazen, and they have several different wines. And I forget who's on the other, Celia Cruz and somebody else. So this is their Cabernet Sauvignon. And it has a picture of Nellie Bly on it. And it has a quote from her that says, "Energy rightly applied and directed will accomplish anything." So it's a little.
I need to go to Trader Joe's.
Yeah, so it's a little rooting for you, like, go get them, girl, along with your tannins and your sulfites. So
exactly. Yeah. And what are you drinking tonight, Michelle?
I'm drinking. It's also holding up my phone, so I have to hold my phone while I take it down. I'm high tech with like that. I'm drinking a White Zin by the Winking Owl.
Oh, how cute!
And it's like $3 at Aldi's, because I like to really splurge when I buy my wine. But it's very good. Like, I watched this documentary about wine the other day, and my forehead's cut off. And someone said, one of like the sommeliers that they were interviewing said, you don't have to spend a lot of money for it to be a good bottle of wine. It's like, that's right. So I will drink my $3 bottle of wine proudly.
Yeah, I mean, good wine is good wine. I remember we posted a video once of people taste testing different wines, and the wines that they liked the better were the cheaper ones. So I've always remembered that and thought about that. And tonight I'm going with rosé because it's really nice and warm out, and so it's definitely a rosé kind of day out here. So I'm drinking an El Toronto. Don't be jealous.
It snowed yesterday.
I was at the beach yesterday.
We can't be friends anymore. I'm sorry.
Fine, whatever. But yeah, mine's El Toronto. It's a really pretty label. It's all pink and blue with flowers and stuff. Very springtime.
Right. But also, you guys have to let me know if I'm shouting at you, because I have headphones on and I feel like I'm one of those people who shouts over their headphones to be heard. So if I start shouting, just please let me know.
Okay, absolutely.
So far, so good.
What? No. But we have some serious stuff to unpack here, because there is one thing that I'm meaning to discuss with you. The trick you play on the readers with her fiance. That was the first thing I wanted to get into. And I would just say, yeah, I was reading this while sick. And so the whole time that we're reading, mind you guys, reminder, we're talking spoilers. I'm thinking Henry's the fiance. The whole, head through, what, half the book it is?
Just
And then
about.
we get to, yeah. And then we get to the point where George is the fiance, and I was like, wait a minute, did I miss something? I was like, was I in that much of a drug-induced coma that I missed, a big plot twist? And I was like, oh my gosh, I love how you pulled that off.
Yeah, I was just messing with you. It's not, it's me. And at least this time I didn't make you scream and throw the book across the room, right? Like I did last time. So,
right.
Yeah, so it's definitely, I was hoping that the reader would wonder and you went down the path exactly that I was hoping you would go down. So this is a success to me. This makes me very happy.
I feel like that's the evil plot completed, where you're just ha 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 ha.
Exactly.
So what went into informing that? Because, that's something you have to play really precisely, because you've got to be precise with the words. Because I did go back and I did look, and there was nothing where she said that he was specifically her fiance. She talked about her fiance. She talked about her love for Henry. So in my mind, in the reader's mind, we just put two and two together that he had to be the fiance. And then all of a sudden you just start to see this thing with George. I was like, oh. So, talk to us about the craft of doing that.
It was super fun. Yeah. So it was definitely all about calibration, and it was partly this, the idea that in the asylum, it's going to be bleak, right? It's an asylum. As fun as I can make it, it's still not fun. So I wanted to work in sort of the story of how she got there as backstory and through these reveries, and give you something more enjoyable and light. I'm like, oh, love story. I always enjoy a good love story. And so I really wanted to incorporate that, but I wanted it to be not what it seemed. So she sort of had to be hiding the truth from herself. She knows George is her fiance, obviously. She has friends. But she's in such denial. She's falling apart. She's completely unprepared for this frankly stupid plan that she has decided to execute on. And so she is just not able to deal with everything at once. So she's like, okay, I'm going to deal with the asylum stuff right now, and then I'll go back and deal with the fiance stuff separately. So she's able to separate the two. And so I wanted the reader to sort of experience the two separately also. And I wanted the reader to be suspicious and be like, okay, well, everything seems great with Henry. When is it going to go horribly wrong? When is Henry going to turn into a complete dick? Or whatever, a glass bowl, as I've seen them referred to some places. But so I want you to be very suspicious of Henry, and is he as good as he seems? And it turns out he is as good as he seems. But I love throwing up all sorts of suspicions and making you wonder, is the narrator reliable? What else is going on? When is this all going to make sense? And then have that lightning bolt moment where, okay, now I understand. And okay, let's dive into the next phase of this.
Yeah, I love it. The whole time that I'm reading, I'm like, oh, it's classic Greer. You now have classic Greer when it comes to the books that come out.
Except nobody dies this time, I think. Maybe this time somebody you think is dead isn't dead, so it's different.
Yeah. It's like Doctor Who. Everybody lives.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I got the very confused multiple question mark text from Diana going, wait, I thought she was engaged to Henry. When did she get engaged to George? And I hadn't gotten to that point yet. And I was like, of course she's engaged to Henry. What is she talking about?
I didn't realize you hadn't gotten to that point yet. I thought you were still ahead of me at that point when I started texting you that stuff.
No, I saw it and I thought, well, that's a stupid question. So I didn't reply right away.
You're still on cold medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. That Dayquil or NyQuil is really kicking strong.
Yeah, I was quite drugged up there for a while.
But I do have to add, the cold has traveled west and now or east. Sorry, forgot what coast I'm on or direction. But I have it now.
Oh no! Oh no!
So today is the first day.
Same one I had where it's just all of a sudden it hits you right in like the nose and then the ears.
I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, I could feel it in the throat. It's a little ticklish. So
yeah, Robitussin. That was what ended up having to kick it for me, was the Robitussin. Just that, and just all the Dayquil possible.
I'm just gonna drink wine and see what happens.
That helps too. I mean, it's alcohol, so it cleanses it all out,
right?
And so go ahead, Michelle.
I was gonna say, I had a very early nerd out moment in the book when she talked about Nellie Bly, and because in Charlotte's world, Nellie Bly had just happened recently, so she was kind of inspired by her and thought, well, if she could do it, I could totally break into an insane asylum and rescue my sister. But was Nellie Bly's actual investigative story on Blackwell Island, is that kind of what inspired the story?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. That was definitely the initial sort of, I had read about Nellie Bly. I love those sorts of stories, but I didn't want to just write about Nellie Bly. Like, I think that there's a lot of great biographical fiction. Obviously my last book was much more based in reality and much more like, hey, here's this really interesting woman. Like, let's find out about her exploits. And this time I wanted it to be a looser interpretation, because if you want to read about what Nellie Bly did, Nellie Bly wrote it down. Like, you can go and read 10 Days in a Madhouse and know every twist and turn of what happened to Nellie Bly while she was in there. And I thought the same thing, sort of, okay, well, if I wrote a journalist character, it would kind of just be a rehash of it. So why don't I use that as an inspiration and say, why else would somebody do something this crazy? Go into, pretend to be insane, go in an insane asylum. There's this amazing, creepy line that Nellie Bly said about Blackwell's Island. And she said, the insane asylum at Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in. Once there, it is almost impossible to get out. And that's what I wanted for this story. I wanted somebody to be like, oh, okay, sure, I'll go in. And then the getting out is really the hard part. Because if you read 10 Days in a Madhouse, it actually was really easy for Nellie Bly to get committed to a public insane asylum in New York City just by basically going to a poor, neighborhood and sort of acting confused until people called the police and she was passed off to the doctors. And then she pretended to have amnesia. And they're like, oh, yeah, you should probably go to the asylum. At least that's how she tells it. So I was shocked when I read it. I'm like, wow, that. And then she finds once she's there, most of these women aren't insane. They're inconvenient for some reason or other. It's a lot of women who don't speak English. So if you're poor on the streets of New York and nobody knows what to do with you, apparently at that time, I'm like, oh, okay, insane asylum. Like, this is just what we do with women. And then the more I looked into it, the more I found, oh, well, rich men, got rid of their wives this way too. Like, they just send them off. And what we define as deviant in different ages is partly about what people in society want to have happen, like the people that they want to have around versus the people they don't want to have around. So they would say, oh, you're a disobedient woman, you must be crazy. But they weren't really. Like, some of them were. Obviously, you've got Phoebe and Charlotte are two very different people. Phoebe does need help. So what do you do with people in society when their families can't care for them? And we need something for that. But they hadn't solved it in their day, and we really haven't solved it all that well, I think, either in our day. We're probably closer, but one of the things I love to do with historical fiction is sort of look at how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. So that was sort of why I decided, okay, well, I always have lots of ideas, but what am I really going to spend the next 2 years writing? And that's why I decided, okay, this is a book that has something to say. Whereas some of the other ideas popping up are just like, oh, that would be fun. But if it could be fun and have something to say, that's, even better.
And absolutely. And I loved how you touched on Phoebe, where she actually needed the mental help, and that juxtaposition between the people who actually needed the help and then the people that were just put outside. Because there was another person there who she was convinced. I forget her name. It started with a D, wasn't it? The one that thought she was possessed by a devil.
Oh, Damaris, I think it is.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and it was like, well, somehow, some way, she got that put in her head that she was possessed by a devil. When it sounds like she probably just had like epilepsy.
Yep.
Or something like that. And now the treatments, from what I understand, those are all historically accurate.
Unfortunately, yes. So it was really a struggle for me to decide what to put in because it was all just so terrible. I should say some of it is not terrible. Some of it is the same thing that we would recognize today. You go to a beautiful place, you get out of your daily routine, you spend extra time resting, you walk in the woods, you breathe fresh air, you eat healthy food, like all of that stuff. That's a spa vacation, right? We would pay money to do that.
Yeah.
And so they had some things that they were correct about, and then other things that they were just way, way, way off on.
Yeah,
so,
like pulling teeth out because they're afraid mental illness came from
yeah,
rotting teeth. Then there was the box, the box on the head,
yes,
and like setting you in there. Yeah.
And just restraints so that you couldn't move, or the bench. Like the benches really got to me because I'm like, there are certain times where I've been sitting still and had nothing to do, and when your mind doesn't have anything to attach to, it's going to make stuff up. And just thinking about that, like being forced to sit still, can't talk, can't move, can't eat, can't whatever. If you're not already a little off, it's going to push you in that direction. So
yeah, I couldn't do it because I'm not one of these people who could actually just sit still. I'm always moving, and I just. Yeah, and then you're sitting on the bench, so it's not like you have something to lean back against. Your muscles are tense, you're sore, you're tired, and your mind having to make up for the lack of any kind of stimulus. It was just, yeah. It's very much how far we've come and where we were.
Yeah.
I love the layout that you created for the wards, like based on the 9 muses. I think in an early episode, Diane and I told Diane, I want to start researching the muses because number one, I didn't know there were 9 of them. I thought there were 3, but I think I was confusing them with the fates.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really unique way to help Charlotte learn the lay of the land versus like, ward 1 or ward 2 or ward 3 or, other ways to do it. I thought that was really creative. Was that based on anything or was that just your brilliance?
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That was an extra little creative notion that I came up with. There weren't any asylums that I researched that specifically used the muses, but it was very Gilded Age to like put a beautiful veneer on something that is not all that great. So it seemed plausible to me that somebody would have done that and would have said. And the guy who founded the insane asylum, right, one of the Sidwell brothers, does have the women's health in mind and say, okay, well, the muses are something to aspire to, so let's make this lovely. And so it made sense to him. It made sense to me to frame it that way. And then it is sort of an easier, and most people can't name all the muses. And even while I was working on it, I had to have a cheat sheet of like, okay, what are the wards and what do they mean? Because I'm like, okay, somebody's in terpsichore and somebody else is in polyhymnia, and what does that mean? So I definitely had a cheat sheet that I was using. But yeah, to sort of put that classical veneer on it was partly because I thought it was true to the story and what worked for the story, and then partly for the reader. Like it's harder to be like, okay, ward 1, ward 2, ward 3, what does that mean? And it gives you a little extra. It gives you a little extra something, which I try to do.
Well, I think also it gave the ward wards character, where that if she was going into this one ward, then that was the kind of treatment that she was going to get, and these were the kind of people that she was going to be surrounded by. And so I liked how that I thought that was a really good device to have that like that. So it also, like you said, it kept it organized in our minds, and then we knew kind of what to expect.
And then also just talking about, earlier we were saying we want to unpack some characters. One character I think that became a lot more complex as you read her was Nora. I don't think when you first meet Nora, you don't expect her to be as complicated as she turns out to be. And all of the side characters, it's not, they're not there to support. They all kind of serve a purpose. So did you know going in that you wanted all of these side characters to have, more than just, oh, we need someone to get her this, so we're going to throw this character in there?
For sure. I thought about for a while writing it with a bunch of different voices and having a bunch of different points of view. And I initially actually started writing it. I did it for NaNoWriMo a couple of years ago and just wrote like anything that came to mind. So it wasn't all in Charlotte's voice. It was sometimes in the voices of these different women. And that's where Nora came from. And it was just a big brainstorming, like what's wrong with all of these women, or what does society think is wrong with all of these women? So Nora came out of that. Like, she's a woman who's having affairs. She's just become way too much for her husband to handle, and he wants her out of the way. So here she is out of the way. Yeah, once I did that, I decided that I did want to go with just the one voice and have it be, narrated in the first person. But I still wanted it all. I wanted it to kind of be an ensemble book that was only narrated by one person. So I really wanted her to observe as much as possible, and for the reader to find out as much as possible about these different women. And Martha kind of muscled her way in. Like, she was not in my original synopsis, but she arrived, and like she was not going anywhere. So Nora and Celia were sort of there from the beginning. Martha and Damaris came in later, and Jubilee became much more important than I initially thought she would be also. So I wanted it to be, and I may have referred to it this way in some of the materials, but trying to think of it as kind of a 19th century Orange is the New Black, where you're seeing all of these different women, and they're from the fringes of society. They're not the high society women, or at least not all of them are. You've got poor women and rich women and prostitutes and everybody. Like, they did what they needed to do, and now they're in this place, which is actually in some ways better for them than being in society. So, and then it's connection and it's community, and they all sort of pull together for stuff. So then when they started talking about revolution and rebellion and escape, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, they're gonna have to work together. And so there's a moment where Charlotte realizes, I'm alone, but I'm not alone. These other women are here. I need to start like cooperating with them. And Nora sort of shows her how it's done, right? Nora is a total operator. But at the same time, Nora is more a prisoner than any of them, because she, spoilers, she tries to stay. So yeah, she's sort of in her own space. But I really, I love having some characters who just say what they think and don't care what anybody else thinks of them. So having Martha and Nora and some of these other ladies, and showing some variation, right? It's not all, they're not all put away for, for affairs or, and again, some of them have real problems, like Phoebe. Damaris's epilepsy at that time would have been like a real problem. So just having these different examples there, I wanted to show the richness and the breadth of what was considered insane at that time, the inconvenience of all these women who weren't conforming in some way.
Yeah, and for a while there, I didn't trust Nora. Like, at first, I liked Nora. I liked how open and outspoken she was. But then as her affair starts to build, and you start to see that there is really something wrong. There is something wrong with her a little bit. She's a little off. It felt like, and then it felt like for a while there that she may have been trying to undermine them. In some ways, to me, it felt that way, where it was like when things started to go wrong for them, when they started to escape, because, sometimes things like that happen. I started to wonder, well, maybe is that her? Because, is she a mole? Because she had that doctor. And I feel like where some of it, did some of the Me Too stuff have an effect on the story itself?
A little bit, yeah. I had to decide how far to go with that because, frankly, in this sort of institution, there probably would have been more sexual abuses. There certainly were in the research that I did, but I kind of didn't want that to be a big part of the story. So you have the matron sort of saying, the matron who is not a good person,
Yeah.
but even she is like, okay, you're going to keep your hands off the women here. And so she's sort of drawing that line, even though she's doing all sorts of other horrible things, she at least has the women's back in that area. And so so Nora's affair is supposed to be kind of ambiguous. Like, is she really giving consent? Is she really a good person? Is she like, I kind of think Nora would have sold them out if there had been any percentage in it, if there could have been an advantage. She probably would have done that because she's not really that loyal. But it turned to her advantage. And in the end, she's like, listen, take my money. I don't need it. I'm never leaving here. So, so I think Nora is very much doing that mental calculus all the time of what's it going to get me? What am I going to lose? What am I going to gain? And so, so Charlotte managed to stay on her good side as much as she needed to get the help that she needed in this particular area.
And in some ways, for me, it felt like Nora kind of symbolized. You see it now and again with some of these abusers that are out there. Like you see it with the R. Kelly stuff. Like I was watching the R. Kelly documentary when that hit, and you had a number of women that were that stood by him, that outright defended him, no matter what everybody else said, no matter what every other woman's testimony was. There were women who were like, he couldn't have done this. He's too good of a person. He couldn't have done this, even though they didn't really know him completely. And in some ways, Nora felt like a manifestation of that. That's kind of what she represented in this kind of world where she was just like, she was almost like a sympathizer in some ways to some systematic abuses that happened in that world.
And to her, it's love, but is it? Like, it's so impossible to say what his affection for her is, what her affection for him is. And then she does have like kind of a screw loose where she's got this passionate like jealousy of Veronica Bell at the end, where she is unhinged at that point in the story. And how much did that play into what landed her in the insane asylum in the first place? So she's different and ambiguous in that way. And I love having characters who are not all good and not all bad. So she was a lot of fun to write in that way.
Yeah, because life is in that gray area. And it also harkened me back to my bachelor degree days, where I went from psychology to sociology, frankly, because psychology got too scientific for me with the whole calculus and stuff. But it was, I really love sociology, but they also looked at the therapy aspect of things within both fields, and the very strict line that they put now on the patient therapist relationship, because those kind of relationships are so easy to happen because of the kind of you're one person's putting all their trust in another person, and so you have that kind of emotional buildup, and there is that really big ethical question when that comes through, and how ethical is it on the doctor's part?
Yeah, I watched a lot of the TV show In Treatment. It was on HBO a few years back, and it's got a lot of interesting stuff to say about like how the doctors and patients are interacting, and somebody thinks they're in love with the other person, and the noble and appropriate and code dictated thing to do from the doctor is to put a stop on it. But what about their feelings? So it's super ambiguous stuff.
And then, one character we haven't really talked about yet is Charlotte. We picked on her a little bit, but she goes from a very naive person. For someone to go, oh yeah, I'm going to pretend to be crazy, get into this insane asylum, find my sister because it's going to be super easy, and then just tell them who we are and that we're not crazy, and they'll let us go.
It's almost Shaun of the Dead-esque. where they're like, okay, we're going to go get the girlfriend and then go to the Winchester and have a cup of tea and watch this all blow over. When you should be staying in your house and boarding up the windows.
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of it. Part of my thinking of Charlotte's character is she has to be the sort of girl who's going to get in over her head, and boy, is she! Like, she's way over her head. And I'm a writer who reads my online reviews, which I totally should not do, and I understand the idiocy of this, but at the same time, I absolutely read my reviews all the time. And I've gotten some bad reviews. They're like, "Wow, Charlotte has a really bad plan," and I'm like, "Yes, Charlotte does have a very bad plan. You are correct." And then part of the fun for me was getting her out of there and having her discover strength within herself that she didn't know that she had. Because my previous characters, people have asked me sort of, how is this different from your previous books? And both Arden and Kate are pretty much in control and capable. And there are some things that happen to them that they wouldn't have chosen. But at the same time, they're bold, they're smart, they're in it, they're going to figure it out. Sort of from the beginning. And it was really interesting and fun for me to write somebody who's not that way. Like Charlotte's like, oh, swept away by love. Like, these other women aren't going to do that. So, so having this character who changes so much over the course of the book was fun and interesting for me, because she really is a product of her age, in that, you know, the ideal woman of that age, you get your, you know, you do your finishing school and you learn how to make wax flowers and paint china, and you get married off to a guy of exactly the right class, so that you elevate your family and continue to rake in the bucks. And so she was sort of created for that. And yet, because she takes this left turn, ends up way happier, I think, than she would have been if she had just stuck with what society was telling her to do, what her mother was telling her to do. I have a pattern of bad parents in my but I think that's also partly true to the period, that what we think of as childhood and what we think of this, like, I'll do anything for my children, was not the way that it was through most of history. So so in that way, people are like, oh, her mom is such a villain. I'm like, she is, but like, I understand why she was that way. That's what made sense to her. And she made her choices to like get the best possible outcome within her framework. So yeah, it's not what we would have chosen, but I don't want anybody in this book to be a complete villain, a complete terrible person. Like, the matron has, you know, reasons that she does what she does. The superintendent has reasons why he does what he does. I will qualify, George is an absolute, like,
I was going to say, except for maybe George.
George is the one villain. George is a major villain.
I am fine saying that George is not black and white in any way. George is just bad guy. Bad guy.
Yeah. George is a dick. Let's just put that out there.
George is a dick, yes.
Yes. Well, and I love, you know, having these books where we have these parents that aren't great, because when you look at it, as parents aren't perfect. As kids, when we look at our parents, we look at our parents as being perfect, as knowing everything. But in so many ways, parents are just trying to figure it out as they go. And then historically looking at the concept, like you said, this concept of childhood is very 20th century. During Charlotte's time, this was late 19th century, early 20th century.
Yeah, that's 1888. So yeah, end of the 19th century. Yeah.
So they're just beginning to have a sense of childhood in that age. But like, you look at, you know, from research that I've done from other books that I've been working on, you don't have a childhood. You have, you know, workers, you have assets to marry off. You have, you know, you don't have this concept of childhood like we have today. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I couldn't see where her mother's motivation was, because you've got to marry your daughters off well, and that's what's best for them in that time frame. It's not like Charlotte can go out and get a job like a woman today can. It's not like she can go out to a university like a woman today can. So the best thing for your daughter at that time was to get her a husband who has done those things.
Yeah.
And, you know, her mother isn't that far outside of that wheelhouse. It's just a matter of her mother choosing George over Henry, which, I mean, come on now.
Come on. It's right there.
Yeah. It was the same family. It would have been fine.
Yeah. think
But
it
I
would
mean,
have
then of course you also have to consider the inheritance thing. How much is George inheriting over Henry?
been. And how much is the other family pushing for it too? Because he's the politician and he needs a wife that's going to like make him look good. So is that her role? And especially because his first wife did not make him look good. They're going to be super careful. They're going to be like, okay, we need somebody from a good family. Like they live right down the street. Like let's choose the girl precisely. And so
how much of, you go into her mother's backstory a little bit where her sister ran off and got married and then was killed.
Yeah.
How much of an effect does that have on her mother with choosing her daughter's destiny? That's something that we have to take into consideration as well.
Yeah. Her sister runs off and, does what she wants and basically dies for it because her ship sinks while she's eloping. Both of the mother's stepsons are killed, on the sea because that's what happened to most people who went to sea. So, so she's super protective. And then Phoebe is sort of the hope of the family. And Phoebe is,
Sorry.
Aw,
Fish little bomb does.
Star turn.
Fish.
Guest starring. Guest starring. It's lovely. Oh shoot! Sorry, my screen went out for a second. Probably because I wasn't moving it around very much. Okay, so so then Phoebe, she has this total left turn where she's trying to make Phoebe the hope of the family, and Phoebe is strutting down the table at luncheons, kicking teacups to the floor because she's in a manic phase.
Yeah.
So that's just not going to work. And so her mother's like, I only have so many options and I'm going to do the best I can with the options I've given. And her dad is a dreamer. Like her dad's a nice guy. Comes through in the end, but he's not really the force of the family either.
Yeah, and I love how in the end you get to see Charlotte actually using her mind, her potential to be able to set up this good future for herself and for her sister and everything. Thus, protecting. It's Clara. Did I get the George's wife's name right?
Oh, Celia. Yeah,
Celia. Thank you. I knew it started with a Celia. Getting Celia's, future protected as well. And so she comes through. You see, it's such a great character growth for Charlotte. I love that. Where, I will put up with a character being immature in the very beginning so long as there is character growth.
As long as they learn something.
Yes. Grow gotta learn. Yeah.
Yes. Because we all go through that kind of phase in life. And so sometimes we need to see that in our characters as well. But one thing I want to talk about is the relationship between Charlotte and Phoebe. I love that sister relationship and that sister bond. So it really captured, what a sister will do for each other, that bond that they have. Because my sister and I, we're 12 years apart. So she's, much younger than me. And so I kind of, we have that traditional, the older sister who will go out and fight anybody and be mean to anybody who's mean to your little sister. But in some ways we see Charlotte acting like the big sister for Phoebe, even though she's younger. Talk to us a little bit about what went into that relationship.
Yeah, I liked the idea of having the responsibility shift for them because Phoebe has always been Charlotte's protector and has saved her life and has looked out for her. But because of her bipolar disorder, because of this onset, that Charlotte then feels like, okay, I've got to step up and take over. I've got to be the one who's doing the protecting. And that's part of what drives her into, again, this crazy plan that is not at all well thought through. So that pushes her to be the one to say, okay, well, my role has always been the one who's being taken care of. And now I'm going to be the one who takes care of things. This time I'm going to clean up the mess. So that was very deliberate on my part. I really wanted to explore that and have the younger sisters become the older, become the protector.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I felt like it was an exploration of the sisterhood bond, where it's my dad has remarked on it with my sister and I. Like when my sister was younger, we used to do a thing where when we go out to restaurants together, we would order for each other. We would have this thing where we look at the menu and we'd be like, okay, what's the one thing you absolutely will not eat right now? What are you not in the mood for? And we'll say, generalize what it is, and then we have to order for the other person. And so for years, that was our thing. From like when she was in middle school all the way to high school, that's what we did. And I did it in part because she was a picky eater at the time. So I was like, we're going to play this game and it's going to be fun. And I let her pick out some really weird stuff for me. But like that bond, when you look at sisters, it's like a different kind of relationship between, whether it's, between sisters than it is for like a brother and sister kind of relationship or brothers. Yeah, like my dad had mentioned, like he's got 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And within his family, he never had, with his brothers, he never quite had that bond and that kind of relationship like my sister and I do. Like it didn't matter that we were half siblings. We're sisters. Sometimes we will fight with each other, but there's this undescribable bond that you can't really quite grasp. And I feel like in Woman 99, you really explore that unbreakable bond between them.
Mm-hmm. And I don't have a sister, so this was invention on my part. This is like, okay, I want these sisters to be so bonded that they'll go to the mat for each other. I have an older brother, so there's this sense of protecting that definitely came through in our family, and like I'll fight anybody thing that was definitely there. Haven't been as close the older we've gotten, so that's what I love about fiction. Like I have something to draw on, but then I'm going to make this other stuff up. So. I enjoy making stuff up. That's what I do.
See, and I am an only child, so I have nothing. But I wish I love that dynamic, that sibling protective, who hurt you and point them out to me and I will take care of it kind of thing. So, but I hope I have 2 little ones, so I'm pretty sure.
Hi, Lily.
Oh yeah, she's taking a cheese stick break from Lego Batman.
Much necessary.
But I really love reading about siblings in stories because I really love that dynamic. It's not always there. It's not a given that relationship is there, but I like reading about it when it does exist. So that was just my observation.
And so,
no, sorry. I was going to say, we just got a whole lot of activity happening in my kitchen. Before there was no one, and now everyone is here.
Well, it's all about the cheese sticks.
And chocolate milk. And the dog and the cat are inside. And now there's chaos.
But you have
if anyone pops up, or if chaos happens in the background, just ignore it.
See, this is why I wasn't worried about it with the little ones. When you were concerned about having another adult watching the little ones, it's like it's cool. Kids pop up all the time.
I was thinking there might be a chance of them, but Grammy is taking good care of it. They are downstairs. I am upstairs, so I think with the 10 minutes remaining to us, we'll probably be guest star free. Although I will not, so we'll see.
Oh yeah, usually for me it's the animals to the point where I've actually had to take the collar off of my dog just before the show starts because you can hear her jingling in the background. But right now I got a special blanket for Instagram because Instagram. It's really nice and fluffy, and I left it within her reach, and she has made quite good use of it. So I'm in between this phase of do I really want to disturb her because she looks so cute, or do I really want to let this blanket get dirty? So it's
a toss up.
Yeah.
So Michelle, any questions? Yeah,
I did. And
great.
I was about
We're on the same wavelength.
So we've talked about how you have kind of like an ensemble cast going. Oh, there's a bicycle in my house. I heard the bell. I'm like, what is that?
It's like a circus.
At first, I thought it was on one of your ends. I was like, oh, that's a weird noise.
It's in my kitchen. Okay.
We were talking before that you have an ensemble cast of all these characters. But oh yeah. Sorry guys. Can you hear
That's
him?
okay.
Or
This is
it
why
just
we
me?
edit it. This is why I edit. It's cool. We have the cares on the live part, and then we edit out when it gets to Spotify.
River has decided that it's playtime. So for you, which character was the most surprising for you as you wrote, and who was the most fun to write?
I guess Martha was the most surprising one because I really didn't intend for her to be in the book, and then she kind of took it over. So I enjoyed that part. Like I said before, like I love writing characters who say whatever they think because that.
Please.
Oh.
Do
Pause,
what it
please.
wants to do.
Okay. Go back to you froze. So go back to the shortly after you start. You like writing characters.
Okay.
Who do like whatever they want to do. And Michelle, you go ahead and mute yourself while River is running around.
True. Okay.
And go. Okay, go ahead.
I really enjoy writing characters who sort of do whatever they want to do because I'm a very mannerly, like measured person. I am not that way at all. Mm-hmm. So it's super fun for me to write somebody like Martha who's just going to say what she thinks, and whatever you think about that, that's on you. So, so she was a lot of fun to write, and I didn't intend for her to be in it. But I liked Celia too, because Celia doesn't say a lot. And so whenever she does say something, it really matters. Mm-hmm. So I had sort of written her for a while and then gone through and like cut everything she said in half, and just get her down to the minimal. Painful for her to speak. She's not really going to do it if she doesn't have to. She's used to being silent. So she was a lot of fun to write for that reason. And then the superintendent is really fun to write because he's super drunk all the time. So he was, effusive in a different way.
The one person we didn't talk on, we could talk on briefly, was Jubilee. And I liked Jubilee because she had, she wasn't as out there as the others, I guess you could say. But she was also... you could tell though she wasn't taking crap from anybody, even still. Even though she wasn't as forceful out there as you can say. And I love how she came through in the end for them.
Yeah. Jubilee is definitely a product of her time, a woman who sometimes we have this sense of history as like a super white place, because that's the history that has come down to us, is the story of the rich people, the white people, the men who have like dictated what's going to go in 3 books. But at the same time, it's not like half Chinese, half white people didn't exist in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. It was that they weren't, in the highest positions of power. So when I started writing Jubilee, she was very much this character of like, okay, what is this woman going to have to do to make her way? Mm-hmm. And so she's a sex worker. She's smart, but she only can get so far because of society. But it's not that she's not smart. So she has made the best possible life for herself that she can make. And she bounces into the asylum and she bounces back out again because they're not going to keep her around. So she was interesting to do because she's might look like she is unhappy from the outside. Oh, poor her. But she's doing all right. She's pretty much having the life that she wants to have and being in the position that she wants to be and making do the best she can. So, so when she's in the asylum, she makes do. When she's out of the asylum, she makes do. And she helps the other women because she wants to. Nobody can kind of tell her what to do. She's just going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. I love that it was a diverse cast of characters. Even Martha was a woman of color. And, I love the fact that, we're starting to see more representation in historical fiction and more of that coming through because, history wasn't white and we can't pretend that it was. We can't whitewash it too as authors.
Yeah, and it has been for too long. So that's something that as I'm writing, and even, I wrote The Magician's Lie. It took me 5 years, but I wrote it, and it was published in, I think, 2015. And at that point, it didn't really occur to me that I should make a diverse cast of characters because that's what history was really like. But I've certainly done more with Girl in Disguise. I've done more with Woman 99, because I think that would have been, and certainly some insane asylums were only for people of a particular race, but this one,
Careful, Lily.
for everybody. They say it's, you know, for the indigent all the way up. Makes sense for this institution. So that's why I gave.
Yeah, and then with the yeah, and with that location too, with San Francisco, you know, it makes sense that it would be diverse because San Francisco was a very diverse place. It still is a very, very diverse place. So having that in there, and I mean, even with The Magician's Lie, which I could say now I've read twice on audiobook and and read it, even without the exact descriptions of people, you can still put in people of color in that easily. Like if you were to cast it for the movie, you could still cast people of color very easily within that world. So it's, you know, it's not very strict, you know, white in there. So I mean, even still, there wasn't the overt color description. You could still put in the people of color. Still works.
And by the way, we created like a whole superhero rescue team for Charlotte and Phoebe that included Nellie Bly and Arden and Kate. We had like a time travel thing put together to help get Phoebe and Charlotte out of there.
Yeah, it's like Greer's like Wonder Friends.
Activate.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we are at our hour. It has come to a very fast end, unfortunately, because we could keep Greer on all night if we wanted to. Really, when it comes down to it, we could talk. We'd switch from the book to persimmons to.
I should have brought something into the room with me. I only brought wine.
I should, yeah, same, because I've got some downstairs. I picked some up on Friday. My Trader Joe's did not skimp out on me this time, and I was very happy.
I was worried that they went away, and I bought like a ton, and then they're still there. So I keep buying more just in case.
Yep, every time I go through, pick up a couple bags. I mean, dried persimmons, really, guys, if you're out there, you're trying to work on your book, you're trying to edit your book, I highly recommend dried persimmons. They're great fuel for while you're editing, especially because, you know, they got that toughness where it's almost like taffy-like. So when you're really frustrated with the edit, you can just really tear into that. Yeah, for those of you who are wondering, Greer is so wonderful that shortly after I got my agent, I got my I got some edits back from my agent that I had to work on. And I went to my Trader Joe's to stock up on snack foods because I snack a lot when I edit. I realize this. So I stock up on healthy snacks while I'm editing. And persimmons are my go-to dried fruit. They're my favorite dried fruit. And my Trader Joe's was out of persimmons. And I posted on Instagram how awful this was. And Greer, as wonderful as she is, this is I still love this gesture. I got a nice little card and a box of dried persimmons sent to me in the mail. And just like the sheer laughter I had of just opening up this box and just dumping out like it was like bag after bag of persimmons just falling out onto my counter. It was greatly appreciated.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose you, Greer?
I'm here. Sorry, there was a little bit of freezing.
So thank you again for that.
You're welcome, and the dried persimmons worked. So
they did, yes. Yeah, because I mean, we haven't broken the news to our listeners yet. Yeah. So the dried persimmons work because I got a book deal. Yay! 2020, The Woman in Red is coming out.
Hey! I'm excited.
Me too. It's so fun. I had to sit on this, and I finally get to share it with everybody.
You need to stop in Chicago on your book tour. No,
yes.
I won't be here by then. I'll let you know where I am.
Yeah.
And wherever I am, that's where you have to be.
Well, maybe, you know what would be awesome is if you guys can be in the Virginia area. I'm hoping for you guys to be in the Virginia
That's
area.
what we're hoping for. Rich, he looked on Friday for his next orders, and we're gonna wait and see what pops up. But we're really hoping for Virginia.
Because there's that Newport News area, right? That's the
Yeah, like Virginia Beach.
I love that.
So,
Yeah, Ryan was there for his captain's training, and I love that area. And we considered when we were living in Texas whether or not we were going to move back to California. We almost moved to Virginia, at least a couple times. So I love Virginia. And Greer, you're in the D.C. area, am I correct? Maryland, D.C., roughly. Yeah. So.
So you can do like a road trip and just visit all of us.
Exactly. And we could totally do a live podcast. We'll have Greer come back on. Yeah. We'll set it up. We'll do it at a bookstore. We'll do a joint book signing, and we'll have a live podcast. It'll be awesome.
All right. So we need orders to Virginia just to make this happen.
Absolutely. We will make that happen.
Make it work.
Yes, absolutely. Very Tim Gunn of you.
He is my aspiration.
Yes. Whether he knows it or not, he's my uncle. Whether he likes it or not.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Greer. It was so much fun having you back again, and I'm sure you'll be back next time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as soon as she announces a book coming out, we're like, okay, when can we schedule you? I think for Woman 99, the moment the news broke that Woman 99 was going to come out, that was your next book, I was like, okay, so what's the rough estimate as to when it's going to come out? Okay, great. This is when it's come out. We're going to save this next month for you for Book of the Month. So when the next book comes out, we're just going to, let us know. We will have you back on again.
I will. Thank you. I always enjoy it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.